Welcome to this explainer. If you're a focused learner looking to really master qualitative research methodology, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we are unpacking a highly practical, step-by-step walkthrough of Virginia Braun and Victoria Clark's immensely popular methodology, reflexive thematic analysis. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever found yourself staring at a literal mountain of interview data? I mean, maybe you've got dozens of audio recordings, hundreds of raw transcript pages, or just this massive spreadsheet of open-ended survey responses, and you have absolutely no idea where to start? It's an incredibly overwhelming feeling, right? You've got all these rich human experiences captured in text, but extracting meaningful scientific conclusions from them, well, it feels a bit like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But hey, you aren't alone. And that is exactly the problem we're going to solve today, by breaking down exactly how these 6 steps work. So, here's our structural roadmap for today. First, we'll answer, what is thematic analysis? Then we'll tackle steps 1 and 2, move on to steps 3 and 4, and finally wrap up with steps 5 and 6. Nice and logical. Section 1. What is thematic analysis? Defining the core method. Before we start building, we really need to define our terms here. Reflexive Thematic Analysis, or RTA, developed by Braun and Clark back in 2006, is a super accessible and theoretically flexible qualitative method. Its core purpose? To identify, analyze, and report repeated patterns of meaning, which we call themes, across a dataset. Now, it's absolutely crucial not to confuse this with quantitative content analysis. We aren't just letting a computer count how many times a specific word was said. No way. RTA is an interpretive approach. It's all about uncovering the deep qualitative meaning behind what your participants are saying and doing so in a highly structured way. All right, here's the blueprint. The 6 phases are familiarization, generating initial codes, generating themes, reviewing themes, defining and naming themes, and producing the report. I want you to keep this overarching metaphor in mind as we go. Doing qualitative analysis isn't just about processing text. We're methodically constructing a house from the ground up. And, you can't put the roof on before you pour the foundation. Moving into Section 2, Steps 1 and 2, the foundation and the bricks. This is where we gather our raw materials. So phase 1 is all about familiarization. You need to actively read and reread your entire data set. And listen, there are absolutely no shortcuts here. You can't just skim. Listening to your audio files, correcting orthographic transcripts, making initial notes in the margins. It's literally like digging the foundation for your house. You have to immerse yourself completely so you truly grasp the depth and breadth of the participant experiences. Oh, and a quick tip. Keep a reflexivity journal during this time to log your initial impressions. Those early, kind of messy thoughts, they often lead to brilliant analytical breakthroughs later on. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens as we move into phase 2, where you're systematically generating initial codes. But first, we need to nail down the difference between a code and a theme. A code is a fundamental building block. It's a short, descriptive tag, something like fear of failure, applied to a specific piece of text. Think of a code as an individual brick. A theme, on the other hand, is a much larger pattern of shared meaning across the dataset. The theme is the constructed wall made up of all those different bricks. So, in phase 2, you are simply manufacturing all your bricks. You're coding as inclusively as possible across your entire dataset, whether that's by hand with highlighters or using software like NVivo. Section 3, Steps 3 and 4, erecting the walls and reviewing the structure. This is where those scattered bricks actually start taking shape. Phase 3 is where you generate your initial themes. Here, your focus shifts away from individual data items and moves over to aggregated meaning. You take all those code bricks you made in phase 2 and you start sorting them into piles based on shared meaning to erect candidate theme walls. Some of these codes might group together seamlessly. Others, well, they might just get discarded. You're essentially looking for how these codes relate to one another to answer your core research question. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how a developed visual thematic map looks in practice. You can clearly see how messy, individual initial codes have blossomed into structured, overarching themes. Things like positive talk versus negative talk, and their respective sub-themes, like pleasure or vulnerability. This map acts as a visual blueprint of your constructed walls. It helps you see the entire architecture of your findings at a single, quick glance. But hold on, here is an absolutely vital piece of advice. Reflexive thematic analysis is highly recursive. I want to emphatically reassure you that jumping back and forth between these phases is completely normal. In fact, phase 4 is all about reviewing your themes. You literally have to check your newly built walls against the original data. Do they hold up? Is there actually enough data to support the theme? Actually, scratch that. If you realize a theme is too weak, you might have to go all the way back to phase 2 to make new code bricks, or maybe split one theme into two. Moving backward is an intended, natural part of the iterative process. It's not a mistake. Finally, Section 4, Steps 5 and 6, naming the rooms and inviting people in. Let's polish this analysis up for the outside world. So, Phase 5 is all about defining and naming your themes. You need to identify the exact essence of each theme. I mean, we aren't just calling our findings Theme 1 and Theme 2. That tells the reader absolutely nothing. Instead, we are carefully naming the rooms of our house to reflect their specific purpose and boundaries. A name like Navigating Isolation as a First-Year Student is punchy, it's informative, and it instantly signals the analytic story you're building for your reader. And finally, we reach Phase 6, Producing the Report. This is where you actually invite people into your finished house. Your goal here is to weave your theme definitions together with vivid, compelling data extracts. Those actual, real quotes from your participants. But remember, you have to create an analytic narrative. You can't just list quotes. You really have to explain why this quote matters and how it directly answers your core research question. And always try to include multiple extracts from different participants. That proves that this pattern is widespread across your data, not just some one-off anomaly. So the crucial point is this. Themes do not just passively reside in the data waiting to be discovered like buried treasure. Rather, the researcher, that's you, must actively construe the relationships. You are the architect, actively constructing meaning from the raw materials. The 6-step framework gives you the blueprint, sure, but your analytical thinking builds the house. As you look at your own mountain of messy data, ask yourself, what kind of structure are you going to build today?